Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take a stack of fascinating sources, articles, research, our own notes, and we basically pull out the key nuggets, the important stuff, to give you a shortcut to being really well informed.
Yeah, cutting through the noise.
Exactly. And today, we're diving into a topic that, well, it's captivated people for centuries, haven't it? Royal romances. I mean, from when we're kids, right? We get this idea of happily ever after, the charming prince finds his true love. Maybe she's a commoner, maybe not, but everything just, poof, magically falls into place.
It's a powerful narrative, but the thing is, the historical reality of these, really intense royal relationships, it's often so much more complex, challenging, sometimes, honestly, profoundly tragic.
That's it, exactly. And that's what we want to get into. What's truly compelling here is how often these real stories push back against those idealized ideas we have.
Right. They pull back the curtain, don't they? They show these deep, deep tensions between, very personal desires, what someone wants, and then the huge public, institutional, dynastic pressures that just come with wearing a crown.
Yeah, the fairy tale version rarely shows the sheer weight of that responsibility, does it?
Not really, no.
So our mission today is to unpack these historical accounts, really dig into analyses of royal lives, maybe even look at some private letters where we can, and pull out those surprising, sometimes pretty unsettling truths.
We want to give you a clearer picture, hopefully, of what was really happening behind those palace walls, far away from the ballrooms and the glass slippers.
Exactly. We're going to be looking at specific historical princes whose emotional lives, their romantic entanglements, were anything but simple or straightforward.
Yeah, our journey is going to take us, from the really rigid courts of the Austro-Hungarian Empire all the way to the heart of the British monarchy and even beyond that.
And these aren't just love stories, are they? They're these narratives where deeply personal yearnings, what people fundamentally wanted for themselves, just collided, sometimes violently, with dynastic duty.
And with the public eye, that unforgiving gaze of public scrutiny.
And the very structure of royalty itself.
Yeah, the institution.
So get ready maybe to have some perceptions challenged, because what you think you know from storybooks, it might be very, very different from the historical reality.
Definitely.
Let's start with a story that's, well, it's probably one of the most famously tragic royal romances in history. A tale that just completely shatters that happily ever after illusion.
Right. Let's begin our exploration with Crown Prince Rudolf of Austria.
Crown Prince Rudolf. Born 1858, the only son, the heir of Emperor Franz Joseph I, and the legendary Empress Elizabeth of Bavaria. Sisi, the one famous for her incredibly long hair.
Iconic figure.
Yeah. So imagine the weight on his shoulders. Destined to inherit one of the most powerful, most storied empires in Europe, the huge, ancient Habsburg monarchy.
But what's really fascinating about Rudolf, I think, is how fundamentally his personality, his whole disposition, just clashed with the world he was born into. He wasn't like a typical royal heir at all.
How so?
Well, he's described as being quite melancholic, but also a liberal intellectual. The genuine dreamer, actually. His mind was apparently exceptionally sharp.
Okay.
And he had these remarkably progressive ideas about things like equality, modernization, ideas that were genuinely way ahead of his time for that context.
Wow. So that must have made him feel
Deeply frustrated, yeah. Even kind of suffocated, you get the sense, by the incredibly conservative politics of his country and just the rigid traditions of the court. His hopes, his desires to modernize the empire, they just sort of gnawed at him.
that internal conflict. Yeah, that must have been huge. He wasn't just some party prince then. He was genuinely bothered by the way things were. He wanted real change, but he was constantly blocked.
Exactly. And his relationship with his parents, especially his father, Emperor Franz Joseph I, who he apparently feared, it was famously difficult, really strained.
Right.
He felt his life was sort of meaningless, almost like being a prisoner, chained by his royal role, unable to really pursue his intellectual or political ambitions.
Which must have contributed to his,
Yeah,
his other struggles.
precisely. The tension between father and son was palpable, and it definitely fed into his emotional fragility. And on top of that, yeah, he wrestled with significant mental instability, heavy drinking, and a history of promiscuity.
And tragically, didn't he also infect his wife?
Yes, tragically, he infected his wife, Princess Stephanie, with syphilis, which then rendered her unable to have any more children,
Oh my goodness.
which effectively ended the possibility of another direct Habsburg heir from that line. It's a devastating personal detail, isn't it? And it just underscores the deep dysfunction in his private life.
All playing out against this backdrop of this incredibly rigid, almost inward-looking Habsburg court.
Which was far from understanding, far from sympathetic to his liberal ideas, or, frankly, his personal struggles. The whole idea of the crown's continuity was suddenly at risk because of his actions.
So here's where the story takes that really devastating turn. It's late 1888. The crown prince, he's 30 years old now, he meets a 17-year-old baroness, Mary Vetsera. Met her at the races, apparently.
Right. And what started as this illicit affair, it just rapidly escalated into this all-consuming passion.
And it quickly became an open secret at the imperial court, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. You can just imagine the whispers, the scandalized looks, the sheer audacity of it all in that environment.
It has caused immense concern.
Huge concern, not just for Rudolph's wife, Stephanie, obviously, but particularly for his parents. They understood how precarious royal reputations were. The whole clandestine nature of it, given Rudolph was married and Mary was so incredibly young, only 17, it was a major scandal. It genuinely threatened the stability of the monarchy.
And didn't the emperor himself step in?
Reportedly, yes. Emperor Franz Joseph confronted Rudolph directly, demanded an immediate end to the affair. He feared the dynastic fallout, the consequences of such a public transgression.
But Mary, she was clearly, utterly devoted to him. There were private letters of hers found quite recently, actually, I think 2015.
That's right. And they confirmed just how profound her love for Rudolph was. She explicitly wrote about her intention to die alongside him.
Wow.
It emphasizes that this wasn't just some casual fling, It was this intense, all-consuming, almost desperate devotion. That level of commitment is, well, it's a universe away from lighthearted storybook romances.
Yeah, absolutely. And this intense affair, it wasn't happening in isolation, was it?
No, not at all. It was unfolding within that powerful, yes, but also kind of inbred and increasingly old-fashioned Habsburg monarchy. A highly regimented court that, like we said, just stifled Rudolph's every liberal hope.
And weren't there even rumors about political intrigue?
There were, yeah, unconfirmed rumors that Rudolph might have been involved in political plotting against his own father, maybe trying to force political change somehow. It just adds another layer of volatility, of desperation, to an already explosive situation. It suggests the personal was just deeply tangled up with the political.
What? And then, the tragic outcome. This passionate, desperate relationship. It culminates in the infamous murder-suicide pact, January 30th, 1889, at the Imperial Hunting Lodge in Maryland.
And the official story at first was this desperate attempt to cover up what really happened.
Right. They first said heart attack, didn't they?
First a heart attack, then they changed it to a suicide pact. But, as often happens, the truth eventually seeped out, revealing the much darker reality of a prince and his young lover taking their own lives together.
So this narrative, it's not about a hero overcoming obstacles for love, is it?
Not at all. It's about a deeply troubled individual, stifled by rigid circumstances, consumed by his inner demons, where that emotional intensity just became destructive passion and ultimately utter desperation.
And the consequences.
Huge. Immense. The death of the sole heir caused a profound dynastic crisis for the whole Austro-Hungarian Empire. This ultimately led to Archduke Franz Ferdinand becoming the new heir presumptive.
And his assassination, of course.
His assassination in Sarajevo in 1914 would famously trigger World War I. So you see this direct line, in a way, from a deeply personal tragedy, a doomed love affair, to a global conflict. It really highlights the far-reaching impact royal lives can have.
So if the storybooks promise happiness, what does a tale like Rudolph's really tell us about the true cost of wearing a crown?
Well, his story is just such a stark, painful subversion of any fairy tale, isn't it? There's no happily ever after here, just a violent, desperate end.
That profound tension between his personal desires, his yearning for change, for a real connection, for a life that meant something, and then his rigid dynastic duties. It just created this inescapable trap.
And the illicit relationship became this kind of desperate escape that, in the end, just consumed him.
And the secrecy, the taboo around their love, combined with that immense parental pressure from the emperor, it just amplified the destructive nature of their passionate, fatal bond.
It really underscores how deeply personal royal dramas can ripple through history. It's far beyond a simple love story. You can clearly see how the human elements, the emotional turmoil, they get amplified exponentially when they involve the highest offices. They set off these chain reactions with consequences that just echo down through generations.
Wow, okay, so from the doomed heir of that sprawling European empire, let's swing over to the United Kingdom. to a figure who was, well, incredibly charismatic, captured the public imagination, but whose love story shook the monarchy to its absolute foundations. Edward VIII.
Ah, yes, Edward VIII. Initially Prince of Wales, and then for that very brief period, King of the United Kingdom. He really was a captivating figure. He had this undeniable charm, didn't he? A sort of magnetic charisma.
Trend-setting fashion sense, too, apparently.
Definitely. It made him almost a celebrity, much more like a Hollywood star than a traditional kind of monarch.
Yeah.
He was known for being able to connect with people, which was quite different from his more reserved predecessors.
Yeah, he certainly stood out from his father. King George was all about duty, deeply traditional. Edward, on the other hand, embraced this much more laid-back, informal style.
But as you can probably guess, that casual approach also extended to his royal responsibilities. And that caused quite a bit of concern among his father and the government ministers at the time.
He had a history of controversial relationships, didn't he? Often with married women.
Yes, numerous affairs. And he showed very little patience for court protocol. He frequently disregarded established constitutional conventions, which was, frankly, a huge red flag for the establishment. They worried about his judgment.
And crucially, we have to mention his views on, well, Nazism.
Yes, it's important to note he held these disconcertingly sympathetic views towards Nazism, which later became a very significant point of scrutiny and controversy, particularly after he abdicated.
So this was a monarch whose personal choices, his political leanings, could have massive geopolitical implications, especially in the lead up to World War II.
Exactly. The government was deeply unnerved by his associations, his perceived lack of discretion. It was a dangerous time for that kind of instability at the top.
His fateful love story, the one that really defines his reign, or lack thereof, began in January 1931. He meets Wallis Simpson, an American socialite.
Right, and by January 1934, she'd become his mistress, apparently quite quickly displacing his then current lover. The whirlwind that followed was really driven entirely by Edward's absolute unwavering determination to marry Simpson. He was completely set on it.
Despite her being twice divorced.
Yeah?
And actually in the process of divorcing her second husband when he proposed.
Yes. And the storm surrounding their relationship was it was multifaceted. It hit every level of the British establishment.
Wallis's divorce status was just unacceptable for a potential queen, wasn't it? Especially with him being head of the Church of England.
Completely unacceptable. The Church of England at the time didn't permit remarriage after divorce if a former spouse was still alive. It was a direct conflict with his moral duties as king.
And the rumors didn't exactly help, did they?
No, they fueled the fire. There were whispers about Wallis's past alleged sexual control over Edward, even a supposed involvement with a married car mechanic, though these were never really proven.
And some influential figures, like wasn't it Neville Chamberlain? They saw her as manipulative?
Yes, future Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, among others, perceived her as manipulative, maybe solely interested in Edward's wealth and status. And her American nationality also didn't sit well with certain segments of the British upper class. There was a definite element of snobbery and perhaps xenophobia involved too.
And then, as you said, their later sympathetic views towards the Nazis just compounded the controversy.
And all of this was happening at such a critical moment leading up to World War II, a period of immense diplomatic tension. So the king's stability, his adherence to protocol, it was seen as absolutely vital for the nation's security and its moral standing.
It must have been a deeply unsettling time to have a monarch whose judgment was so openly being questioned.
Absolutely. And the British press, interestingly, they had this kind of self-imposed blackout initially. They tried desperately to keep the story contained within the UK.
But that couldn't last, could it?
No. Eventually, the American and European press broke the story wide open. And once it was out, it just erupted internationally. It forced the issue right into the unforgiving public spotlight.
The outcome was, well, unprecedented.
The abdication.
Truly unprecedented. Edward VIII abdicated the British throne in December 1936, a decision that sent absolute shockwaves across the globe.
And his famous declaration, "I could not reign without the help and support of the woman I love." It's echoed through history, hasn't it? Framing it as this grand romantic gesture.
It has. He was succeeded by his younger brother Albert, who unexpectedly became King George VI, the current Queen's father. Edward was then made Duke of Windsor.
But Wallis, controversially, she was denied the title Royal Highness.
Yes, a very clear signal of the royal family's disapproval. They married in France in 1937 and basically lived out their lives largely in exile, never fully welcomed back into the royal fold. So on the surface, you can see it as the ultimate love conquers all story, right? A prince choosing personal happiness over a crown. but actually, it's a profound subversion of that idea.
I think so too. It wasn't really a fairy tale triumph in the end. Their life in exile, marked by continued controversy, the lack of full acceptance, it shows that love didn't lead to a universally accepted or truly happy royal ending in the traditional sense. It came with huge personal and public costs.
It really raises that question, doesn't it? Was it a romantic triumph or was it a constitutional crisis?
And the outcome overwhelmingly suggests the latter, or at least that the constitutional crisis aspect was paramount. It demonstrates the immense institutional and societal power that can and did override even a monarch's personal desires.
That rapid, dramatic unraveling of centuries of tradition really reflected the monarchy's fundamental emphasis on duty, didn't it?
Absolutely. Edward's own duty-averse personality, his impatience with protocol, made him unwilling to compromise with what the establishment demanded. And Wallace's controversial background, the perception of her, it just made her unacceptable to those traditional structures, regardless of Edward's feelings.
So that combination, Edward's stubbornness and those rigid institutional barriers, it just created this unavoidable crisis. It forced the abdication.
And it fundamentally altered the trajectory of the British monarchy. It set this really strong precedent, emphasizing duty over personal choice for future royals. It dramatically showed how much public opinion, how much the media could influence, even dictate royal narratives, even for the most powerful figure in the land.
Okay, moving from that dramatic abdication of Britain, let's shift our focus to Sweden. A different kind of royal romance played out there. One that might seem a bit closer to the fairy tale ideal, but still it came with significant costs and represented a pretty profound shift in royal values.
Right. Now, you might have heard whispers or seen things about a Prince Carl of Sweden marrying a Hollywood starlet, or maybe someone linked to Greta Garbo.
Yeah, I think I've heard something like that.
Our sources clarified that while Prince Carl Johan Bernadotte, who was the youngest son of King Gustav VI, Adolf was indeed friends with Greta Garbo, the specifics about marrying a Hollywood starlet under a pseudonym for the specific Carl, well, they aren't fully backed up by the research we have here.
Okay, so what's the real story then?
The real story, and it's significant in its own right, focuses on his choice to marry a commoner, Kirsten Weichmark. And that, at the time, was a very big deal, a major departure from royal tradition.
Right. So Prince Carl Johan, he chose to marry Kirsten Weichmark in 1946.
Exactly. And this decision was a significant break from that traditional royal protocol where high-ranking royals were almost always expected to marry strictly within other royal or noble families.
Marrying commoners was rare back then.
Very rare, and it often carried severe penalties. Usually it meant forfeiting royal titles, succession rights, what's often called a morganatic marriage.
Morganatic marriage.
Right.
That's where the spouse and kids don't get the royal titles or place in line for the throne.
Precisely. So the key decision point here wasn't about, say, a scandalous affair like Rudolph's, but rather this dramatic, unconventional choice to deliberately give up royal status, give up those privileges for personal love.
It was a notable, conscious break from centuries of dynastic tradition, prioritizing affection over his inherited position.
And the cultural context in Sweden at the time is pretty important for understanding this. We're talking early to mid-20th century. Sweden was changing rapidly.
Moving from agrarian to a modern welfare state.
Exactly. Growing demands for universal suffrage, a more egalitarian social structure. While royal marriages were still largely dynastic, society was modernizing. Personal choice, individual happiness, these ideas were starting to gain more weight against rigid tradition.
So while marrying a commoner was still pretty controversial,
it was gradually becoming more accepted as the century wore on, and actually in some ways, making such a personal sacrifice for love could even endear the monarchy to the public. It fostered a sense of connection, showing that royals maybe valued love too.
So what was the outcome for Prince Carl Johan?
Well, the outcome was indeed marriage to the woman he loved, a genuine personal triumph in that sense. But, like we said, it came at the significant cost of his Swedish royal titles and his rights to the throne.
So he wasn't Prince Carl Johan anymore.
He subsequently assumed the surname Bernadotte, which is the name of the Swedish royal family, and later he received a new non-Swedish royal title, Prince Bernadotte, Count of Wisborg, which came from the nobility in Luxembourg. So a different kind of happily ever after. One clearly defined by sacrifice.
Okay, so this one, yeah, at first glance, it might seem closer to that fairy tale ideal. Marrying for love, getting a form of happily ever after. But there's that crucial caveat, isn't there? It really sets it apart from simple storybook endings.
Absolutely. While it definitely mirrors the love conquers all idea, and it does end in marriage, it profoundly subverts the expectation that the prince just keeps his full royal status without any consequence.
The renunciation titles, yeah, that highlights that even in a happy outcome, royal life imposes these substantial trade-offs that you just don't see in fairy tales.
And it reflects that deeper societal shift where personal happiness started to gain real weight against those strict dynastic rules. It shows a monarchy adapting, maybe slowly, but adapting to changing societal values.
And this choice, while deeply personal for him, really reflected that broader shift in the 20th century, didn't it? Where individual desires began to genuinely compete with ancient traditions.
And cases like his set important precedents for later royal marriages to commoners. It signified a gradual modernization of monarchies, even if certain protocols, like, renouncing succession rights, still remain in some places even today.
Okay, from that quieter renunciation in Sweden, let's turn to a far more volatile narrative back in Germany. Crown Prince Wilhelm. This is a story that completely shatters that illusion of the dashing prince.
Crown Prince Wilhelm of Germany, born 1882, eldest son of Kaiser Wilhelm II. Initially, he was kind of romanticized, wasn't he? As this dashing, military-minded heir.
He had that strict military education, groomed from a young age to be the monarch.
Meticulously groomed. But beneath that polished public image, Wilhelm was known for what the sources quite bluntly call a dissolute life.
Dissolute life, meaning?
Well, he gained a pretty notorious reputation as a ladies' man among his own officers, which, in that context, was definitely not seen as a mark of honor. It suggested a lack of seriousness, maybe poor discipline.
And his father, the Kaiser, wasn't happy about it.
No, Kaiser Wilhelm II strongly disapproved of his son's blatant promiscuity. At one point, he even banished the young prince to Danzig, trying to curb the constant court gossip and get his son's behavior under control.
And wasn't he also mixed up in politics?
Yes, adding another layer of controversy. The Crown Prince was associated with radical right-wing opposition movements in Germany, which was problematic for the heir.
And all this is happening within that rigid Prussian military tradition. In an ambitious German empire just teetering on the edge of World War I, stability and moral rectitude were supposed to be paramount.
Absolutely. He did have a dynastic marriage, though, to Duchess Cecily of Mecklenburg-Schwerin in 1905. Apparently his father influenced that match, impressed by Cecily's beauty and her family's connections to Russia.
But did the marriage settle him down?
Not really, no. Despite the arranged marriage, Wilhelm very quickly went back to his affairs with other women. His alleged mistresses included famous names like the American opera singer Geraldine Farrar, and even, supposedly, the infamous spy Mata Hari. It really illustrates the breadth of his indiscretions.
So the chronic scandals surrounding his romantic life, it just stemmed from this persistent promiscuity, this dissolute lifestyle.
Entirely. It generated huge amounts of gossip at court, significantly tarnished his reputation, even among his own military officers. And while the big Eulenburg affair around 1907-09 mainly exposed homosexuality in his father's inner circle, that general atmosphere of scandal, of abnormal sexuality at court, it undoubtedly impacted the Crown Prince's public image, too, and the monarchy's perceived moral standing.
Created a perception of moral decay at the top.
Exactly. And you have to remember, German society back then, especially the military elite, held very strong, very conservative views on masculinity, honor, morality. So scandals related to sexuality or dissolute behavior were particularly damaging for public figures, especially the heir to the throne who was meant to embody national virtue and strength. It just eroded trust.
And the outcome of Wilhelm's life was, well, far from a fairy tale ending.
Very far. His military command during World War I, particularly at the horrific Battle of Verdun, was highly controversial. He was later widely blamed for the offensive's catastrophic failure, which significantly weakened his position and his public standing.
And then after the war.
Following the German Revolution in 1918, he renounced his rights to the throne and actually fled into exile in the Netherlands. He did return in 1923, but his efforts to try and reestablish the monarchy were completely unsuccessful, largely because the public was just disillusioned with the whole imperial family by then.
And the collapse of the imperial family brought immense personal heartbreak too, didn't it?
Yes, huge heartbreak. His younger brother, Prince Joachim, tragically committed suicide in 1920, apparently suffering from severe depression, unable to accept his father's abdication and his own failed marriage. Crown Prince Wilhelm himself died in 1951. He lived a life that saw the definitive end of his family's reign, and the tumultuous rise and fall of Nazism, a witness to massive historical shifts.
So this story, it just completely shatters that dashing prince ideal. Despite maybe being romanticized in some circles, he's revealed as personally flawed. Engaging in affairs that undermined his reputation contributed to this perception of a dissolute life.
His romantic entanglements weren't a source of strength or happiness at all. They were just a series of scandals that contributed to a decline in public trust, a decline in the monarchy's moral authority. His intense personal desires often seemed unchecked, leading to disastrous public consequences.
Precisely. The tempest in his life was one of personal and national decline, wasn't it? Far removed from romantic bliss. It vividly reveals that tension between the carefully curated public image of a royal and the often messy private reality.
And it shows how unchecked personal behavior, when you're in a public, highly scrutinized role, can lead to profound devastation, not just for a family, but for an empire. His personal failings, particularly that promiscuity, contributed to a bad reputation even among his own officers, potentially eroding his authority during the crucial war years.
And the immense pressure of being the heir, coupled with his personal flaws, likely hindered his ability to effectively navigate the political and military challenges of World War I.
Very likely, leading to him being blamed for significant failures and ultimately contributing to the collapse of the imperial system. The heartbreak, the exile, the end of his family's dynasty. These were direct consequences of Germany's defeat and the abolition of the monarchy, but his personal conduct certainly didn't help matters. It's a case that powerfully illustrates the heavy burden of expectation on royal heirs and the destructive nature of unchecked personal behavior when you're in a role that demands moral leadership.
Okay, from the downfall of an empire, let's turn our gaze back to the British monarchy again. But to a different prince this time. One whose life was, well, a real web of hidden desires and scandalous secrets. Prince George, Duke of Kent.
Prince George. Born 1902, he was a British prince, fifth in line to the throne initially, the fourth son of King George V and Queen Mary. And interestingly, he was often considered the most intelligent and cultured of their children.
And his position, being further down the line of succession, that actually gave him more freedom, didn't it?
Ironically, yes. It afforded him a greater freedom, perhaps, to challenge royal tradition, to push boundaries compared to his older brothers. And this led to a reputation, certainly within aristocratic circles, as a bit of a royal rebel.
He definitely wasn't your typical straight-laced royal. Sources call him an unabashed partier, a shameless bedroom romper. He was a prominent member of that bright young thing social group in the 1920s.
Right. That generation of young, often aristocratic Londoners known for their flamboyant, hedonistic lifestyles, elaborate parties, lots of indulgence, which apparently included heavy drug use for some, including George. He clearly embraced that culture of excess.
And his private life was incredibly complex, wasn't it? A network of numerous hidden affairs, with both women and men.
Yes, openly defying the conservative norms of British society and the royal family in the early to mid-20th century. Among his female liaisons were the acclaimed musical theater star Jessie Matthews and the American socialite Kiki Preston.
Kiki Preston, wasn't there a drug connection there?
Yes, he was rumored to be addicted to morphine and cocaine along with her, and there were even rumors he might have fathered a son with her. Unconfirmed, but persistent rumors.
And then there were his male partners.
Yes, including the writer Cecil Roberts, the Cambridge intellectual Anthony Blunt, who years later would be notoriously exposed as a Soviet spy, and most notably, perhaps, the flamboyant playwright Noel Coward.
So the turbulent nature of his romantic life, it was characterized by the sheer breadth and the highly controversial nature of these relationships, directly challenging societal, royal expectations of morality and sexuality in what was a deeply restrictive era.
Absolutely. And the scandals, the taboos associated with Prince George were significant, and they were fraught with danger for him. His bisexuality, his homosexual affairs were highly taboo for the time, especially for a royal. Homosexuality was illegal in Britain, heavily stigmatized.
And there were rumors that security services were monitoring him.
Reportedly, yes. Rumors included him parading in drag with Noel Coward, even being arrested for suspected prostitution, though that's less substantiated. It highlights the active efforts, though, to suppress and control these aspects of his life.
And didn't something happen with love letters? Blackmail.
Yes, the story goes that love letters exchanged with Noel Coward were allegedly stolen. or perhaps had to be bought back from a blackmailer, it just highlights the intense vulnerability, the secrecy surrounding his private life.
And his drug addiction was a major concern for the royal family, too.
A huge concern, leading to desperate attempts to separate him from Kiki Preston, who was seen as this dangerous influence. And you have to think about the broader cultural context, right? The golden age of Hollywood, the bright young things era. There was this tension between public indulgence and strict moral codes.
Leading to things like lavender marriages in Hollywood.
Exactly. Marriages of convenience designed purely to conceal LGBTQ plus identities for public figures. While George wasn't an actor, those intense societal pressures to conform were equally applicable to royalty. It forced this life of elaborate public performance and hidden desires.
So what did the family do? Try to settle him down?
Yes. In an attempt to encourage him to settle down, conform to royal expectations, an arranged marriage to Princess Marina of Greece and Denmark took place in 1934.
And they had children.
They had 3 children together, yes, presenting this picture of traditional royal domesticity to the world. But despite that public conformity, his complex personal life largely remained hidden from the public eye throughout his lifetime.
And then tragedy struck.
Yes. Tragically, Prince George's life was cut short. He died in a military air crash in 1942 at the very young age of 39, which of course prevented any potential public reckoning or perhaps personal freedom he might have gained later in life.
So this is just a profound subversion of any fairy tale, isn't it? His love life wasn't a singular, pure romance leading to a storybook marriage. It was this series of illicit, hidden, scandalous relationships.
No open acceptance, no celebration of his identity. His early death basically sealed his complex, often painful life, leaving it largely unacknowledged publicly. It's a stark reminder of the human cost of intolerance within that gilded cage.
The story really reveals the profound societal repression, doesn't it? Of non-heteronormative sexualities within royal spheres back then, forcing his true self, his relationships, into secrecy.
The intense emotional journey in his life wasn't just about passionate romance. It was about this desperate search for identity, for pleasure in a highly restrictive and judgmental environment. It starkly demonstrates that duality of royal existence, the public image versus the private reality, and the enduring human cost of intolerance and enforced conformity.
And the strictures of royal life, the illegality, the profound taboo around homosexuality, it forced George's relationships underground, which inevitably contributed to their scandalous nature when whispers got out.
Exactly. And his position, being far from the throne, maybe it offered some initial freedom to explore, yeah? But the family's deep concern, their active attempts to control him, including arranging his marriage, they demonstrate the firm limits of that freedom.
His story provides this crucial, often heartbreaking window into the hidden lives of LGBTQ plus individuals in positions of power during a repressive era, underscoring that enduring pressure on royals to conform to idealized, often strictly heteronormative expectations.
Okay, from London's hidden secrets, let's travel back one more time to the heart of the Austro-Hungarian Empire for another really striking example of a royal who defiantly pushed boundaries. Archduke Ludwig Victor of Austria.
Archduke Ludwig Victor, born 1842, he was the youngest brother of Emperor Franz Joseph I, same emperor from our first story about Crown Prince Rudolf.
Right. And within the Habsburg family, he was widely known by the nickname Luzi-Wuzi.
Uzi-Zuzi.
Wuzi-Wuzi. And he was largely regarded as an eccentric oddball, distinctly different from his more serious siblings.
How so? What made him eccentric?
Well, for one, Ludwig Victor was openly homosexual, at least within his close circles. Sources describe him as a cross-dresser with a reputation as a libertine.
Wow, in that era.
While he did pursue a military career, as was standard for archdukes, he apparently showed absolutely no interest in politics whatsoever. Instead, he preferred to dedicate his considerable time to social activities, building up an extensive and impressive art collection, and generally indulging his passions.
He sounds like quite the character.
Apparently, he was entertaining and witty, but also feared for having a very sharp tongue, and sometimes perceived as engaging in intrigues within the family, which sometimes made him a bit of a difficult presence at court.
And his open homosexuality, you said that was an open secret.
Yes, an open secret within his personal circle and the wider aristocratic society. But it was largely kept from the broader public because of the incredibly strict press censorship that was enforced during his brother the Emperor's long reign.
And didn't he host parties?
He hosted what were called homophile soirees at his city palace in Vienna, which served as this crucial hub for his social life. a space where he could presumably be more authentically himself, surrounded by like-minded people.
And he refused marriage proposals.
Explicitly. He declined all attempts at arranged dynastic marriages to suitable princesses, including his first cousin, Duchess Sophie Charlotte in Bavaria, and even Isabel, the heiress to the Brazilian throne. Despite significant family pressure to secure alliances and provide an heir, it was direct, persistent defiance of his royal duty.
But then things came to a head publicly, didn't they?
Yes, the public scandal surrounding Ludwig Victor finally culminated in this major incident at a Vienna bathhouse, which is apparently a well-known cruising spot for men at the time.
What happened?
The story goes he made unwanted advances towards someone, it escalated into a punch-up, and resulted in him being publicly slapped. A huge humiliation. He was also known, apparently, to sexually harass male subordinates, which led to internal complaints.
Gosh, and to really grasp the severity of this, you have to place it in context, right? Late 19th century Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Exactly. It was a time of evolving yet still deeply repressive attitudes towards homosexuality. Interestingly, the term homosexuality itself was actually coined in the late 19th century by an Austrian-born Hungarian psychologist, Carolee Maria Benkert, which tells you something about how relatively new the concept was in terms of its medical and social categorization.
And legally.
Legally, there were prohibitions against sodomy, though the penalties had lessened somewhat from death to prison terms by the early 19th century, but homosexual subcultures were beginning to emerge in rapidly growing cities like Vienna during the Industrial Revolution.
Places like public baths and parks became meeting spots.
Crucial, albeit risky, cruising venues for men to meet. And while the aristocracy and nobility sometimes showed more private tolerance for alternative sexualities compared to, say, the burgeoning middle class, public scandals were still severely punished, and strict press censorship was always used to protect the carefully curated image of the imperial family.
So the outcome for Ludwig Victor after the bathhouse incident was severe.
Severe and definitive. Following that incident, Emperor Franz Joseph I, finally unable to ignore the public humiliation, forbade him to stay in Vienna, effectively banished him from the imperial capital.
Banished. Where did he go?
He spent his last 15 years in relative isolation at Schloss Kleisheim near Salzburg, surrounded by his extensive art collection, a kind of gilded imprisonment.
And then later.
In 1915, he was officially placed under the care of a conservator due to mental incapacity, possibly some form of dementia, which isolated him even further. He died in 1919, just months after the final collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He was the last of his immediate family, having witnessed the end of his dynasty and lived this life defined by such stark contrasts.
This story is just the complete antithesis of any Disney romance, isn't it? His love life wasn't about finding a soulmate or getting married. It was about navigating a forbidden identity in a deeply repressive society.
No romantic partner to ride off into the sunset with, just a series of clandestine encounters followed by public humiliation and ultimately banishment and institutional control. His story speaks volumes about societal intolerance.
This case powerfully highlights the pervasive societal homophobia, the legal persecution of homosexuality, even within the highest echelons of power.
His flamboyance, his refusal to conform, just clashed violently with those rigid royal expectations, leading to isolation, public humiliation, eventual institutional control. It profoundly underscores the historical struggle for LGBTQ+ rights and the immense human toll of living a life deemed unacceptable by society, regardless of your privilege.
And his open secret status, despite the strict censorship, it vividly highlights that tension, doesn't it? Between personal identity and enforced public morality.
Absolutely. While his brother, the emperor, initially protected him, that undeniable public scandal at the bathhouse forced Franz Joseph's hand, leading to Ludwig Victor's permanent banishment from the capital.
The societal context where homosexuality was criminalized, deeply stigmatized, it meant his romantic and sexual pursuits were inherently fraught with danger and led to severe, life-altering consequences. It reveals the immense human toll of living a life deemed unacceptable, even for those with immense privilege and power.
Okay, so now that we've delved into these, well, quite intense individual narratives, let's try to unpack the common threads. Because what's truly fascinating, I think, is how similar the underlying struggles are, despite the very different outcomes in different eras we've looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. And the core tension seems to be this constant battle. Duty versus desire. That's what jumps out, isn't it? The prince wants one thing, but the crown, the institution, demand something completely different. We saw it everywhere in every single one of these stories.
You've absolutely hit on something crucial there. And if we connect that to the bigger picture, it's not just a personal struggle, is it? It's a structural tension.
Yeah.
It's deeply embedded in monarchical systems themselves.
Right.
The intense emotional journey, the whirlwind in these royal lives, often arises precisely from that clash, and it threatens the very foundations of royal power and tradition. Unlike fairy tales, these real royal romances demonstrate profound sacrifices or maybe lifelong compromises.
Like Prince Rudolph. His liberal ideals clashing so violently with that rigid court, leading to his deep frustration and tragic end. He yearned for a different path.
Exactly. Or think about Edward VIII. His personal choice to marry Wallis Simpson directly contradicted his kingly duty, plunged the nation into a constitutional crisis. It showed his personal desires simply couldn't coexist with the crown.
Even Prince Carl of Sweden, who did marry for love, he willingly renounced his royal titles. A direct trade-off, wasn't it? Personal love versus inherited status. A conscious sacrifice.
And Archduke Ludwig Victor's explicit refusal of all those dynastic marriages was a clear defiance of his family's expectations for a Habsburg heir, driven purely by his homosexual identity. This conflict seems inescapable, a constant negotiation.
And these weren't private affairs, were they? I mean, maybe they tried to keep them private, but they ended up being played out under this intense, unforgiving spotlight, under the weight of an entire nation's expectations, sometimes the world's.
Which really raises that important question. How much of a royal's life is truly their own? This pervasive scrutiny reveals the performative aspect of royalty, doesn't it? Where personal lives are constantly being curated, managed, judged against these stringent societal and moral norms.
Yeah. Scandal isn't just the act itself, it's a perceived threat to moral authority, to public trust. Fairy tales just don't feature this relentless, judgmental public eye.
Not at all. We saw it with the initial cover-up attempts at Maryling after Rudolph's death, or that desperate press blackout surrounding Edward VIII and Wallis Simpson, which eventually just erupted onto the world stage anyway.
Prince George, Duke of Kent, navigating that clandestine personal life with his bisexuality and drug use hidden or subject to rumor. It highlights the immense pressure to maintain a conventional public facade.
Definitely. And Archduke Ludwig Victor's homosexuality being an open secret until that public brawl forced his banishment, despite all the strict censorship efforts. Even Crown Prince Wilhelm's dissolute life, though maybe not always public scandal, significantly tarnished his reputation among his own officers and the broader public eventually. The monarchy was actively, constantly trying to control public perception, often, frankly, unsuccessfully.
It really is the ultimate golden cage, isn't it? You have immense privilege, immense power in theory, but also these immense limits, these unseen restrictions, particularly on your personal life.
That's the paradox, isn't it? Royal status, while bestowing immense power and privilege, simultaneously imposes these severe constraints on personal choices, especially in matters of love and partnership. The intense personal journeys we've explored often represent this desperate struggle against those gilded bars.
Unlike the powerful free Disney princes.
Exactly. Real princes find their power is inextricably intertwined with their personal lives, which makes their choices far more complex, far more consequential.
Prince Rudolph's position as heir meant his illicit affair had profound dynastic implications, right? Contributing to a crisis that ultimately altered the line of succession for an entire empire.
And Edward VIII's kingship transformed his desire to marry a divorcee into a full-blown constitutional crisis. It demonstrated that even a monarch's personal choice could threaten the stability of the whole system.
Prince Carl's royal titles were directly tied to his marriage eligibility, necessitating their renunciation when he chose a commoner. A stark trade-off.
Right, and Prince George's royal connections might have initially enabled a degree of illicit behavior, access to certain circles, yeah, but they also necessitated extreme secrecy and led to active attempts by the family to control his life through that arranged marriage.
And Archduke Ludwig Victor. His status as the emperor's brother initially provided him with some protection, some latitude. But when his behavior became too publicly scandalous, his royal status dictated banishment rather than, say, imprisonment. A distinct form of institutional control.
Yeah. It illustrates that royal power, while seemingly absolute, is profoundly constrained by tradition, by public expectation, by these deeply entrenched institutional structures.
Okay, so to really drive this home, bring it all together, let's put those rosy fairy tale ideals side by side with the often brutal, complex royal reality we've just uncovered. This is where we really distill the core differences, I think.
Yeah, this consolidated comparison really helps us grasp those aha moments, doesn't it? And truly understand the profound divergence from the popular narratives, especially the ones we kind of grow up absorbing.
Okay, first up, the beloved idea of love conquers all. In fairy tales, true love overcomes every external obstacle. Evil stepmothers, curses, poverty leading inevitably to marriage, and pure happiness.
But in royal reality, love often fails to conquer all. It can lead to abdication, like Edward, renunciation of titles, like Karl, banishment, like Ludwig Victor, or even death, like Rudolph. Personal desire constantly clashes with rigid duty and unforgiving societal norms. It's a battle where love rarely emerges as the sole victor. It's frequently overcome by the sheer weight of the crown.
Then, the classic happily ever after. The fairy tale promises that marriage to the beloved signifies the definitive end of all struggles, the beginning of a life of blissful, uncomplicated joy.
But in reality, marriage is often a deep compromise. It might be arranged purely for dynastic purposes, or even a lavender marriage explicitly designed to conceal a secret identity, like potentially might have been pushed on someone like Prince George. And even if it is based on genuine affection, the happy outcome almost always comes at a significant cost, like exile for Edward and Wallace, or loss of status for Karl. Struggles continue, and they're frequently intensified by constant public scrutiny and the never-ending demands of royal life.
Okay, and what about Prince Charming himself? In the stories, he's inherently virtuous, brave, morally upright, the perfect, unflawed romantic hero who swoops in and saves the day.
Whereas the historical princes we've looked at, they're complex, deeply flawed individuals. They grapple with profound personal struggles, addictions, mental health issues, controversial private lives that frequently undermine their public image and their capacity for leadership. They are far, far from perfect heroes. They are, in fact, painfully human.
And the romantic dream of marrying for love, where the prince chooses his partner purely based on romantic affection, regardless of her social standing or background.
While love can certainly be a powerful motivator, a deep personal desire, the reality is that dynastic considerations, public acceptability, strict institutional rules, they heavily dictate who a prince can, or perhaps more often, cannot marry without severe consequences. It's almost never a simple, unfettered choice of the heart alone.
And finally, that idea of unconditional acceptance. In fairy tales, the prince's love interest is readily accepted by the family, by the kingdom, often celebrated for their unique qualities, the true love they bring.
In royal reality, love interests, especially commoners or those with controversial backgrounds or perhaps forbidden identities, they face intense scrutiny, often outright rejection. They're very frequently deemed unsuitable by both the royal establishment and the demanding public. There's absolutely nothing unconditional about it. Acceptance is earned, if it's earned at all, usually at immense cost.
And just quickly, that idea of the private romance, where the love story supposedly unfolds intimately between the couple, challenges are internal or from clear villains outside the relationship.
Royal romances are intensely public spectacles. They're constantly scrutinized by the media, the court, public opinion, often leading to scandal, forced concealment. There's very little privacy to be found inside that gilded cage. Personal lives are always subject to external forces.
So, as you can clearly see, the intense relationships of these historical princes, from Prince Rudolph's tragic end at Mayerling to Edward VIII's unprecedented abdication, Prince Karl's quiet renunciation, Crown Prince Wilhelm's scandalous private life, and the hidden desires of Prince George and Archduke Ludwig Victor, they collectively demonstrate, don't they, that the reality of love within royal circles is just far more nuanced, far more complex, and often much darker than those idealized fairy tales suggest.
These narratives aren't merely stories of romance. They are profound tales of sacrifice, of scandal, and the relentless pressure of public life.
If we connect this to the bigger picture then, these narratives, they aren't just like historical curiosities, are they?
Not at all. They are powerful reminders that even crowns, even inherited power, they don't insulate individuals from heartbreak, from the profound consequences of their choices, or from the crushing weight of societal and institutional expectations. Despite their extraordinary privilege, these figures faced universal human challenges. That struggle for identity, the pursuit of personal desire, the quest for happiness.
The intensity, the whirlwind of their romantic lives, it wasn't some joyous, effortless journey, was it? It was often a tempest, a storm of conflicting duties, public judgment, deep personal turmoil. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does.
What does all this mean for us? Well, perhaps these unwritten, challenging chapters of royal love remind us that the greatest test of any relationship, maybe royal or not, might just be navigating the complexities of who we are, what we desire, and the world's often unforgiving gaze. Always searching for that elusive happily ever after, whatever it truly costs. What stands out to you about these real-life love stories? Something to think about.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
We hope you gained some surprising, maybe profound insights today. Until next time.